Salve.
Salve. Loquer in latine?
Loquo.
Nonne Galli sunt barbari?
Barbari sane sunt.
Germani quoque barbari sunt, nonne?
Ita sunt. Omnes cui non sunt Graeci barbari sunt.
Sic est. Omnes qui non... Manedum? Quid? Romani non sunt barbari.
Sane domine, Romani Graecique non barbari sunt.
Recte dicis. Neque Romani neque Graeci barbari sunt.
Omnes cui non sunt Graeci sunt barbari.
Big thanks to Luke at Scorpio Martiano's channel for helping me create this intro. He teaches Latin in a very fun way. Check him out, link in the description below. Gratias Tibiago. Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking Netflix series Barbarians. We still have a lot to say. Okay, as you already know, I like the series. I've already made a video about it where we discussed the historicity and historical accuracy of weapons, armor, but also the unfolding of the events. On this video instead we are talking about something different. What does it mean to be a barbarian? There is a lot of talk in this series about the usage of the Romans of the word barbarians. We see at the very beginning of the story they tell us they called them barbarians. And I'd like to talk a bit more about what it meant to be a barbarian from the perspective of the Roman Empire, both on a social level and a juridical level. Now I'd like to connect with the beginning of the video, the funny intro, because it wasn't the Romans that created the idea of the word barbarians, it was the Greeks. The Greeks invented the term and it was used to mean anyone who is not Greek is a barbarian, and the etymology of the word teaches us that what they meant by the word barbarian, they meant someone who is unintelligible, someone who speaks gibberish. But obviously it didn't matter if these foreigners came from the east, from the west, from the north, they were all barbarians if they weren't Greeks. Therefore, the Romans, at least at first, were considered barbarians. And we do have proof of this. We can see in early Roman and Latin literature, for example, the Roman writer Plautus was the very beginning of Latin literature, and he copied the Greeks, obviously, because they were the example to follow, and he set his plays in Greece. And the characters in the play who are Greeks, when they refer to the populations in modern-day Italy and in Rome, they call them people coming from barbarian cities, eating in the way of the barbarians, so like laying down with the triclini. Well, you know how the Romans did. Obviously, the Romans did not appreciate that, and once the Romans conquered the Greeks and they become the authority, the governing authority, then they kind of changed that, because you have to understand that the Romans, even though they did conquer the Greeks, they had the greatest admirations for the Greeks. Why? Because of their art, religion, poetry, classics. They were very, very sophisticated people, and the Romans admired that, so they gave them a lot of liberties and a lot of freedom in their cities, even though they were under Roman rule. But of course, one of the things they wanted in exchange was the extension of the meaning of the word barbarian to mean everyone who is not Greek and Roman. Most likely the Greeks in secret among themselves still called the Romans barbarians, but publicly speaking the situation changed and the Romans were happy with that. So yes, of course, the Greeks and the Romans did consider the Germanic tribes to be barbarians, but they did it in a very different way. And this is how we are going to connect to the TV series on Netflix and understand really what it means when the Romans called the barbarians barbare. You see, for a Greek, once a barbarian, always a barbarian. You have to be born a Greek to be a citizen. There is no way for you to change that. It's tied to blood and your ancestors and your place of birth. Before the Romans, it was not like that. So the Romans were a lot less strict than the Greeks in their understanding of the term barbarians. In other words, the moment a barbarian became a Roman citizen, he stopped being a barbarian. So this already gives us a different understanding of how the Romans used that term. Because as you watch the Netflix series, since it is created so that you see the Romans as being the villains and the Germanic tribes as being the people who are fighting for freedom and liberty, so of course they're the people that you're supposed to root for, you might get the wrong impression of what it meant when Romans called other people barbarians. So how difficult of a task was it to become a Roman citizen? But to answer this question properly, we need to choose a specific historical setting. Well, let's start talking about the late Republican period and the early Imperial period of the time of the Principate, because this is when the Netflix show is set. It's in 9 AD, which means we're not only during the Empire, because of course the Roman Empire begins in 27 BC, but we're still under the first emperor, Caius Julius Caesar Octavianus Augustus. There were, generally speaking, two ways to become a Roman citizen and therefore gain all the rights, and both juridical and social rights, of a Roman citizen, and to also stop being called a barbarian by the Romans. The first way to do it was to be extremely successful, rich and powerful. So, if the Romans conquered an area, it became a Roman province and they pacified the people in that area, and you were a prince, a nobleman, a rich person, someone with influence and power, well, the Romans specifically sought for people like that, and they wanted these people to enter the empire, to enter the imperial machine. And we do have quite a lot of documentation belonging to this period of letters written by local officers sent to the emperor who were asking, hey, there is this guy here, he's an important person, he's a prince, he's a member of a rich family, and we think that he should become a Roman citizen. What do you think, emperor? And the emperor will usually write back, maybe ask about their Latin. How is his Latin? Is he learning it? Can he speak it fluently? And of course then you can imagine that in some cases maybe the guy didn't really speak that much Latin, but if he paid the local officer, a little bit of corruption also existed. We have to say that people with power and influence became citizens. However, even if you were poor, you still had a chance to become a Roman citizen. Join the Roman army. So let's say that you were poor, you didn't have much, and after the Romans conquered your land, you basically don't have anything left. So you have no chance of being selected as an influential person. You're not as rich as one of those merchants from that family that has been selling cattle and accumulating goods. But you are strong and you're young. This gives you a chance to join the army. By joining the army and becoming an actual soldier and learning Latin, of course, you will gain citizenship, and as you finish your service to Rome, you could go home and live a good life, have a family, own land, and bring with you all the money that you have. In the series, we kind of see this, but we don't really see it much. We see it a little bit with Arminius, of course, but that's a bit of a different situation. He was kidnapped, and that was, of course, a way to keep a certain level of leverage against the people that they were trying to conquer, but that was not something that only happened to people, to children that were taken forcefully from their family. You could, if you wanted to, you could join the army, and then as you become a Roman soldier, you stop being called a barbarian, and we know this for a fact. Once a soldier, you're a Roman. So that's why I felt a little strange when two things happened during the series. Thing number one, Varus at one point kind of underlines and tells Arminius that he was born a barbarian, that basically he has no future in Rome, but that's not accurate. It doesn't matter if you were born a barbarian, particularly if you were as successful as Arminius. Of course they did that because they wanted Arminius to be upset with Varus, but that doesn't really look like something realistic from my point of view. Yes, probably Varus did want to use him as a puppet king. Probably that would upset Arminius, obviously, but not really underlining the fact that he was born a barbarian, if not to underline the fact that he had skills such as linguistic skills and knowing the people. Even if you were born a barbarian, once you became a Roman citizen, you had the same juridical and social rights as any other citizen. Now, of course, at the very beginning of the history of Rome, only people from the city of Rome were citizen. Then, as time goes on into the Republic, the entirety of modern-day Italy, everyone who was born within that territory was a Roman citizen. But then the situation will expand, and if we reach 212, so about 200 years after the events of the TV series on Netflix, the Emperor Caracalla, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, will do something that will echo through the centuries because of how amazing it was, and that was the fact that he gave Roman citizenship to anyone within the empire. After he passes this new law, there were no more citizens and non-citizen subjects. There were only citizens and, of course, the barbarians who were outside the frontiers. This is massive, and in fact at first it was frowned upon by the Senate, but generally speaking, when an emperor wanted to pass a law, he passed a law. Let's go back in time to 9 AD again And let's speak about Arminius. So, Arminius was born a barbarian, but now he had become a Roman citizen, and he was also a very successful soldier. So, what can we learn about his name? His name, Arminius, was of course a Roman or Latin corruption or adaptation, as I like to say, of the original Germanic name, which he had. We really don't know what it was. There is some speculation about linguists, but we don't really know what his name was. In the TV series, the name Ari is brought forth. Maybe not, we have no way to know. But there is one thing we can know. Most likely, his full name after becoming a Roman citizen was Caius Iulius Arminius. If I were a Roman soldier, I would bet a month's pay on that. Well, the Romans had a system in place for when citizenship was given, and that was you would be given a Roman name. Now, perhaps I'll make a dedicated video on how Roman names worked, because they're a lot more complex than they had many names. Each name had a meaning, there was a system, a specific way. I'll talk about it, but the first two names you would get as a new Roman citizen, were the first two names of the emperor under which you received citizenship. Who was the emperor during Arminius' times? Caius Iulius Caesar Octavianus Augustus. That's why earlier in the video I said his full name in Latin. It wasn't just to show off. Well, a little bit. I want to say 99% of cases that was his name. Caius Iulius, that's for sure, and then Arminius, of course, which is the corruption of the original Germanic name. During the times of Caracalla, so again, let's fast forward to 212, when he gave citizenship to basically half of the empire, what happened is that half of the empire had the name Marcus Aurelius plus their original name, and we can see that, and I'd have to thank Professor Barbero, Alessandro Barbero. You'll find a link in the description below to his channel for those who understand Italian, because he has some amazing lectures, and in one of his lectures, in fact, he stresses this idea because he says that there are entire transcriptions of the name of each single member of a unit of soldiers that used to be barbarians and then become Roman citizen, and guess what? 300 soldiers, 300 Marcus Aurelius or Marci Aureli, plus of course at the end of that, the adaptation of their original name in Latin. So one thing instead I like about this TV series is that Arminius is actually very proud of his Roman name, and in fact he says it quite a few times, and he says the whole thing, and even when he tells his Germanic friends, and I think that that's pretty cool, because it was not an easy thing to do, again, not at that time. And later on, yes, citizenship will be given to everyone, but at that time, it was not easy, and so the fact that you had it must have been something that made him proud, even though at the end he chooses to betray the Romans. Muppet. Perhaps on the next video we could talk about why I think he chose to betray the Romans. That could be an interesting one. Let me know in the comments below if you like this idea. Now, another thing I would have wanted to see during the TV series is I would have wanted Arminius to look more German, to be honest. I would have liked him to be taller and perhaps blonde. Again, we don't know for sure that that's what he looked like, but we could guess. And he looks very Roman. In fact, he looks very Italian, to be honest. I think it would have been nicer if he looked like a German, more typically like a German, because that would have created an interesting contrast between his Roman clothes and armor and his obvious barbaric body. I think that would have been great, but still, the actor is great, so I appreciate him and his acting. Now, to finish the video off, I'd like to mention another event that happened that can help us understand how the condition of being a barbarian changed depending on the political situation and political foreground and matrix that governed the decision of the bodies, the authoritarian bodies in command. The Roman writer Tacitus tells us about Emperor Claudius and something that he did that again made the senators mad in Rome. Because again, you have to understand, yes, we are in the imperial times, but that doesn't mean that after the Republic the senators just disappear. The senatus still remains for quite a lot of time. The thing is that now, of course, you have the princeps at first, so the emperor, and he is the one in charge, but he still has the senators that represent very important and powerful and rich Roman family against Cornelia, against Julia, etc. So the Roman emperor is not exactly a dictator. He is someone who
has absolute centralized power, but he also needs to make sure that he still is friends with the Senate, and he needs to talk, and they have meetings, and then they need to pass laws together. And this is important because sometimes emperors did try to stomp the Senate. Sometimes it went well, other times they got assassinated for it. So you understand, it's a very subtle and fine balancing game between the emperor and the Senate. And one thing Claudius does is that he tells the senators, how about we nominate some new senators directly from the Gauls? Now, we know through Tacitus that the senators were not happy about it. But at the end, Claudius will convince them. Julius Caesar tried to frigging murder every single Gaul in Gallia. He tried a literal genocide. He killed 1 million. There were probably a few other million left, so it didn't work. But that is an enormous difference, a massive change of heart, if you will. The fact that the Romans called people outside barbarians, it wasn't because of race. Yes, the Romans looked down on the barbarians. That's absolutely true. I mean, that goes without say. But that was from the perspective of the Romans because they were less cultured, uncivilized, and not sophisticated enough. In fact, when they look at people such as the Greeks, they don't call them barbarians. When they look at people like Egypt, well, we know the fascinations that, for example, let's say Marcus Antonius, but quite a few Roman generals really fell in love for Cleopatra because she was an amazing woman of culture, intelligence, and political power. And it did not matter where you were from. Once you stopped being a barbarian and you renounced your heritage and became a Roman, once you did that, it did not matter anymore where you came from, color of your skin. In fact, the Romans almost never mention the color of skin. They do, so I can't just completely say that no Roman ever looked down on someone who looked different, because we do have an account of a Roman general who saw a sub-Saharan soldier who was very black and thought that there was a dark omen and that everyone was going to die. So yeah, that's not very nice, of course, but generally speaking, it didn't matter where you came from or what you looked like, because Rome was built on the concept of a multi-ethnical society. Alright, number ones, well, I hope that you enjoyed this second episode of me talking a little bit about these TV series on Netflix, Barbarians. If you like this, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet members of this community, become a number one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. I have more episodes coming up. I'll have one in a collaboration with Scorpio Martianus, where we will be examining the Latin of the TV series and give you the translation, help you learn it because it's really cool, and see how accurate it was for the time. If you like this idea, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for your support as always, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Valete!